Today's video is sponsored by Surfshark VPN, of whom more later. Our video today is the result of visiting the Bluebell Railway, which is mostly in West Sussex. Apparently there's 2 Sussexes these days. Also there's like 4 Yorkshires. I don't know what's going on there. Hard enough keeping track of London, the City of London and Greater London. Anyway, the Bluebell Railway is one of my favourite heritage railways. Firstly, because it's easy to get to by public transport. There's a train straight from Clapham Junction to East Grinstead that takes less than an hour. And secondly, because it has a really eclectic collection of locomotives. And that's what we're going to look at today. And also, just to be clear, there's footage from at least 2 visits here, so yes, there will be a lack of continuity between shots. Because, you know, I pay a lot of attention to continuity on this channel. Yeah. The Bluebell Railway is one of the first standard-gauge steam-hauled heritage railways in the world. It's between the Bluebell and the Middleton Railway, depending how you class these things. The name comes from the huge number of bluebells that grow alongside the track, although they weren't out when I visited. It runs from East Grinstead to Sheffield Park, where the locomotives are stabled. The first engine we're going to look at is undoubtedly the most famous. Stepney, built in 1875. Stepney is a London, Brighton and South Coast Railway A1X class, better known as the Terriers. As the name suggests, he was built for service in East London, specifically intended for the London and Blackwall Railway. But the connection between the LBSC and the London and Blackwall at Shadwell was never built. Stepney would later work on the Hayling Island branch before becoming the Bluebell's first locomotive. If you're wondering why he has a face, that's because he was a celebrity guest star in the Railway series books, and later the Thomas the Tank Engine TV series. The Bluebell Railway has a second Terrier, Fenchurch, also built for East London, but sadly this was not accessible when I visited. The Bluebell Railway's second locomotive is the South Eastern and Chatham Railway's P-class Bluebell. The Bluebell has 2 Ps. The other was known as Primrose. The Ps were built from 1909 to 1910 as, basically, the SECR's take on the Terriers. They weren't quite as versatile, not being as powerful, but they were good enough that 4 survived into preservation. Given that only 8 were built, I think that's pretty good going. Primrose carries South Eastern and Chatham colours, while Bluebell wears a sort of pastiche Bluebell Railway livery. Also, Primrose isn't technically called Primrose anymore, but I find names easier to remember than numbers. As a result of this, I sometimes find it hard to remember how good the deal is from this video's sponsor, Surfshark VPN. How many extra free months are they offering this time? Just in case you weren't aware, Surfshark is a service that protects you online. It's advanced encryption and servers in... how many was it? Oh yeah, over 100 countries means that it keeps you safe from snoopers online. Even better, you can use it to get around region restrictions, so you can gain access to content from other countries, get around government censorship, and get great prices when shopping online. Now, I'm not good with numbers, but I know a low price when I see it. And you can use Surfshark on as many devices as you like. That's not me having trouble with numbers. It can be used on unlimited devices. Thank you. I've just been informed that if you follow the link in the description below and enter the code Jago, you can get 3 months extra free on top of a 2-year plan, with a 30-day money-back guarantee, which all adds up to a pretty great deal. Let's just say, I like those numbers. And now, back to the trains. Also from the South Eastern and Chatham Railway is the C-class. This is your classic early 20th century 6-wheeled goods engine. The kind of unsung hero that you could see all over the southeast of England on branch lines, and they kept working into the early 60s. You may recognise this one from its brief appearance in the film Wonder Woman. The C-class was the successor to the O1 class, and there's also one of those here. The O1s were rebuilt from the South Eastern Railway's O-class. This one was built in 1896. Not long before the C-class were introduced in 1900. It was rebuilt in 1908 into an O1 by the South Eastern and Chatham Railway, which is why it now looks so very similar to the C-class. It was preserved and narrowly avoided repossession when Ashford Steam Centre closed down. It escaped the repo men by being dismantled and hidden in pieces. Happily, the engine ended up here, where it returned to service in 1999 for the 100th anniversary of the South Eastern and Chatham Railway. It is the only surviving locomotive of the South Eastern Railway. This engine here is another London, Brighton and South Coast engine. It's an E4 which, during its LBSC days, was named Birch Grove. The E4s were built between 1897 and 1903, and they were intended for mixed traffic duties on branch lines. But they were particularly good on passenger trains. As a result, they survived until, basically, Dr. Beeching started sharpening his axe. A very distinctive locomotive, also designed for passenger work, also a late survivor, is this London and South Western Railway 415 class locomotive, better known among enthusiasts as a radial tank. The radials were introduced in 1882 for work in the suburbs of London, but in less than a decade they'd been superseded by more modern locomotives. They weren't a very strong or versatile engine, but what they did have was flexibility, literally. They could work far tighter curves than other engines of a similar size, and so 3 of them survived far later than they really ought to have on the Lyme Regis branch. That's where this one was rescued from, as the least rebuilt of the 3. It had escaped rebuilding thanks to a period with the East Kent Railway where it had been of very limited use. Also from the London and South Western is this engine, Normandy. This is a B4, and these engines were designed as dock shunters. The wheelbase is very short, but it's got great big cylinders for a bit of oomph. The funny-shaped cab there is to make it easier for the crew to see around it. Like the radial, it was designed by William Adams. This one worked at Southampton Docks and was later sold to Corral Limited for work at their coal depot before being saved from scrap by the Bluebell Railway. The railway used to call it the reason we don't need a diesel, but then they got some diesels anyway. This is Captain Baxter, sometimes known as just Baxter. The Captain was built in 1877 by Fletcher Jennings of Whitehaven, and worked its entire life as a shunter at Dorking Greystone Lime Works. It's rather small as steam locomotives go, and that's unfortunate because it means it has a somewhat limited use on a heritage railway. It's good for shunting and always has been, but unfortunately it can't really pull passenger trains. It did appear in the film Muppets Most Wanted, but like most people, I haven't seen that. Anyway, I like small industrial engines, so I like Baxter. We're going to step outside for this engine, which has been repainted between videos, which is going to ruin the continuity here. This is a North London Railway Class 75, the only surviving North London Railway locomotive. It was built in 1880. I love the North London Railway. Engines like this worked goods trains from around the London Docklands to Willesden Junction. This one later ended up on the Cromford and High Peak Railway in Derbyshire, where its sure-footedness made it useful on that hilly line. It has the somewhat bizarre distinction that it was used in the demolition of the Bluebell Railway between East Grinstead and Ardingly in the 60s, then worked on the reconstruction of that line. Funny how life goes. And to finish, this one. This is a Great Western Railway passenger engine of a class known as Earls or Duke Dogs. Now I know what you're thinking. Duke Dog isn't even a word. Stop your nonsense, Jago. To make things even more confusing, this engine, which looks pure Victorian, was built in 1938. Well, I say built, more like assembled. The way it worked was this. The Cambrian coastline had very strict weight restrictions, which meant that the Great Western had a very limited pool of engines that could work it. And by the 1930s, those were really getting on. So the GWR took the boilers from Duke-class locomotives and stuck them on the frames from Bulldog-class locomotives. Success! The engines were originally to be named after earls, but the story goes that the earls in question didn't like the idea of having such lowly, old-fashioned engines named after them. So the names were used for a batch of the more glamorous Castle class. This one was saved by Oliver Veltham, the district traffic superintendent at Oswestry, who was in the habit of hiding historically significant engines until they could be preserved. Once brought to the Bluebell, the last Duke Dog was given the name Earl of Berkeley, because no aristo can stop the Bluebell Railway. Well, I do hope you enjoyed this video. I certainly enjoyed making it because, as I say, I like quirky old steam locomotives. I would like to thank my donors on Ko-fi and Patreon and here on YouTube as ever for your support. You are the hidden siding to my Oswestry works. I would also like to thank Surfshark for sponsoring this video. Click on the link in the description below to take advantage of their generous offer. And I will see you all again very soon. Cheerio.